Today, our guest is SSD Abel, a fitness coach and YouTuber who has interviewed experts in the evidence-based fitness community since 2016. We talk about trigger foods, body fat percentages, and some of the golden nuggets he learned from his interviews.
All right, so I wanted to start by taking you back to a time when you started your journey. I'm guessing around your early 20s, finishing up environmental science at Avens University. You had a expectation of what your lifestyle would be with an aesthetic body. I'm curious, what is something that went better than you expected and something that went worse than you expected?
So what went better with trying to accomplish that goal, having an aesthetic body? Okay, that one is an interesting question. So, well, let's start with what went worse than I expected, because I can definitely think of one obvious example. So I definitely didn't expect that I would develop disordered eating patterns to the point where it would actually be a problem that would also affect other areas, and then I would try to normalize myself and I wouldn't be able to. So I didn't expect that I'm gonna be creating this monster, which then I will have to battle with. So that definitely went worse than I expected. I also just didn't expect that it would be this difficult, to be honest. Like I sort of had this idea of myself that I'm an exercise and diet like hyper responder beforehand. So I was always a kind of a sporty kid, and I tried various sports in high school and even in elementary school, and I always kind of felt that I had a relatively easy time getting myself into shape, because anytime I tried to sort of just clean up my diet a little bit for the summer or whatever, I got relatively lean relatively fast. But by relatively lean, I don't mean according to the standards that I have now, just down to maybe like 15% body fat or so, maybe even a little bit higher. But, that's already leaner than most people. So I thought like, okay, I guess this stuff just works. And I would just do pull-ups and push-ups at home, and I would get a nice little muscle pump. And while being relatively lean, I felt like, I'm a fitness model. I'm rocking this. So I had the feeling that, okay, if I'm doing stuff like that and it already works so well, then if I actually get into the gym and I start following some regimented program or something, then, it's going to be amazing. And then, things started happening, but very, very slowly. So I realized that, okay, beforehand, it was not the case that I put on a lot of muscle really fast, which is what I thought, but I just got a bit leaner, and then that revealed the muscle that I already had. And it was, like the first time I tried getting abs, it was just this really very long and grueling process. So that was a surprise. And yeah, maybe those would be the main things. What went better than I expected? Oh, already worse than expected. I thought that obviously the typical thing of girls would care more about it, and it was surprising that they didn't. So that's another thing. What went better than I expected?
You mean no girls asked what you benched?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's also just people in general. Like they get used to the fact that you're the fit guy, and I guess that's a nice feeling. But it sort of just you start realizing how many other things in life there are that you should be working on, and that have a potential to improve your social life and your dating life. Actually, I just had a call with a client a couple of days ago, and he said that, man, like I was at this party, and it's fair to say I was the guy in the best shape there, or the person in the best shape there, and just had to realize again that, man, women just so don't care about this. Like they want to hang out with the funny guy or with the tall guy, or like all kinds of like types of people that they're more interested in than the fit guy. So it just seems to not matter very much. And it's also something that, like, it's good if you're fit, but if you're really fit, like now, for example, I am at the point where, like, if I'm just hanging out in a t-shirt, or especially like shirtless on a beach or something, like it's obvious that, okay, I work out. and that's good, but you need to pay some extra attention basically to not live up to some of those stereotypes that people have about people who look a bit more jacked. So like obviously they start looking for the flaw right away, like, okay, he's jacked,
But
so where is the catch? Like he must be this very one-dimensional person. He only can talk about working out and nothing else, or he's a gym rat but kind of dumb. So they would have these ideas. So you sort of need to pay some extra attention to show those other qualities, or to actually just act like as if you're, yeah, like I'm a normal person just like you are, just happen to have this other thing going for me as well. So yeah, like it can be an unexpected extra difficulty as well, not just a positive. So that's kind of interesting how that works.
Was there anything specific that went better than expected?
So I wouldn't say that anything. Well, I did not think that counting calories for the first time ever would actually produce such a drastic change. So that was kind of a shocker for me. So I started following some bad influences initially, and I even got convinced that calories don't matter. And then actually my father, out of all people, convinced me for the first time to count my calories once at least, just to see where I'm at. And I started doing that, and I even limited myself to some very low number just to prove it to him that, you see, like, calories in, calories out don't matter. Like, the reason I'm not losing weight is not because of calories, it's some hormonal thing probably, or inflammation or something like that. So I started counting calories, and I set myself at, like, I don't know, 1,300 calories. Like, you see,
No
this is a very
way.
low calorie number. And you will see that I'm still not going to be losing weight. And look, it rapidly dropped a lot of weight. And I was like, oh, well, okay, then I guess it works. So, so that was an interesting experience, definitely. And yeah, I would say just definitely didn't expect that I would find myself in such a great community of people. Like, the fitness industry, while it can be very toxic and there's a lot of negatives that we can talk about, but I would say that it's welcoming and is ready to integrate new people like very few other communities can. Like, now, for example, you're reaching out to people, and you mentioned some of the people that you've interviewed already and that you have lined up. And I mean, these are some pretty big names as far as, like, the more evidence-based side of fitness goes, or maybe even outside of that. I mean, some of these people have, like, 1 million subscribers or close to it. And, you just started out, but they're happy to interact with you. I think this would be harder, I'm assuming, to pull off, for example, in the financial world or something. Like, if you wanted to get the biggest finance YouTubers on your podcast, like, I would imagine that would be a tougher thing to pull off. So, and not just that, but in general, I made friends on the internet, basically, since I've been in this world, that I'm interacting with on a basis, and I've discussed, like, some of my biggest, I don't know, like, private life struggles with them, and I got to know them through YouTube and through this whole online fitness community. So that is definitely a huge positive that I never expected.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you talk about how, being in good shape doesn't change your life on its own, but perhaps it can provide confidence. And I think it's up to the individual to use that confidence in different areas, whether it be relationships, developing a personality, and things like that, and not forgetting to use that newfound confidence to develop other areas of their life as well.
Oh, yes. I mean, if I think back to the last, so what is it now, 2024? So let's say I look back at my last 10 years. That would be a good time frame, because that's, so I always date 2013 as the official date when I started doing this whole thing. And if I think of what my best years were, I would say 2013 was kind of meh. 2014 was good. 2015 was good. 16 was not good. 17 was good. 18 was meh. 19 was interesting. 20 was meh. 21 was... So anyway, I could go on until 24, but the point is 2023 was not good, for example. And, in 2016, for example, which was not good, in 2024, 23, which was not good. Throughout a lot of that, I was actually in really amazing shape. Like I could go to any beach and would be very proud to show off what I have to the people around. But the reason they were not good years is because I can just not remember a lot of other memorable things that happened to me, or accomplishments or big benchmarks in those years that I can think back to and think like, okay, like this was amazing. And I can, like, if I narrowed it down even more and would think of sort of like 3 to 6 month long stretches of time, I could think of a lot of dry, just empty periods where sort of nothing was going on. And in the meantime, I was all into my fitness progress, and I made really good progress in the gym. I was lean and all of that. But that by itself is not going to create things to remember, and is not really going to create things of value to you. So I think that socially, having things that move you and that inspire you is important. So it's important to surround yourself with people that excite you, people that inspire you. So this can be accomplished in, both in your romantic life and also in your friends groups. Also in your academic or work life, it's important to have things that you can be proud of, or things that inspire you to move forward. If you don't have that, then I think quickly you can start feeling like a fraud or a failure in life, like just because of the way society is set up. If you're not succeeding in some ways in your work life, then you sort of just start moving lower and lower in the food chain of life. And that's just something to accept and something to embrace, and then start doing things so that you move up. And I definitely had periods in my life where I neglected that, and yeah, I definitely felt the consequences of that. So once I had pretty poor social life in general, didn't have a lot of, like, I've had times when I wanted to do something cool and I didn't even have people to reach out to because I just alienated myself. That's a very crappy feeling. I've had times when I felt like, okay, I'm completely stuck and I'm not moving forward in my work life. Like, I'm not doing great financially and I would like to do better, but I don't even know where to start. Those were not great times. When I was studying environmental science, for example, I've had times when I felt disconnected with what I was studying, and I didn't know if there is any future in this. And I've seen other people around me who were really into that, seeing how passionate you could be about this, but I'm not, was also a crappy feeling. And again, in the meantime, I was into fitness like really hard. And that by itself, once again, was not enough to improve things. So it can be a nice addition, but it's easy to be a guy in great shape who is broke in the meantime. It's also easy to be a guy in great shape who is very lonely in the meantime, and also very low in confidence in the meantime, because once again, like, you're going to get some validation from people because of a good physique, but not enough to like really skyrocket your confidence. So yeah, there's too much evidence basically, which is already enough to show us that, yeah, by itself is not enough, but it can definitely be a nice bonus. So if you can do pretty well in all these other areas, and then you have a really good shape as a bonus, now that can make for some really cool things for sure.
Awesome. I appreciate your transparency there in that answer. One thing you talked about was the community and how awesome it's been for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw some images on the screen, and when the person comes up, tell me what's the one thing that you've learned from them, and then what workout you would do with them in person if you met up.
Cool. Oh, already starting off right away with the person who is probably number one if I had to name my good influences in the field, but at the very least in the top three. What I've learned from him, I think one big thing is the value of being patient in a number of ways, being patient when it comes to your fitness progress, not trying to, so it's good to be ambitious and it's good to chase your results, but not chase them so with so much impulsivity, um, and with so much, I guess, just tendency to do things and change things right now in the hopes of making things even better when you don't even know whether you could really make things better, or just sort of be satisfied with progress that is there reliably and is happening, but perhaps just not as fast as what you would ideally want it to be. So the value of patience in that front, also the value of patience in terms of jumping onto new novel ideas that perhaps are exciting, but are just simply not tried and true ideas enough to where we could be like really confident that they will pay off. So Eric is someone who is not going to jump on the bandwagon when some new trend is coming out in diet or training circles, for example. Like he's kind of conservative, and is definitely a lot more conservative than I would be just by nature. Like I think I would have the tendency to be an early adopter if I was completely just left to my own devices. And anytime I heard him speak about a lot of these things, he always brought balance and a little bit of soberness in the middle of like very heated sort of vibes when people were like really, really ready to jump onto something new. And I guess just in a general sense, he is one example of someone who just very, very slowly, predictably, and linearly kept climbing up and up in the ranks in terms of his accomplishments, while never sacrificing his integrity, or never selling out, and never even turning into a cringy someone. Like that is something that a lot of people do. Like initially, they're really passionate and they're really true to their principles. And it's not that they sell out completely or anything. They just get sort of increasingly more cringy the longer they are sort of public figures. And he never did that. And I think that's a perfect model for not just in fitness, but in any area.
And what would you train with him if you could meet up in person?
What would I train with him
Yeah.
in terms like, that's an interesting question. Probably lower body, just to see how hard he really trains, and that is probably a good way to measure that. Because like guys always like to push themselves on the bench, but to push yourself on a leg press, that is something that you're only gonna do if you're truly hardcore. And I know that he is hardcore. He has to be, because he is a successful powerlifter and bodybuilder. But it would be interesting to see it in person.
All right, next one.
Oh, is that just because? Well, that is Giannis, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, okay, is this some like fitness figure that I'm not recognizing right now?
Freak.
Yeah, that's okay. I was like, okay, if you're gonna put that picture in, then that is very impressive that you prepared, because I'm a fan of Giannis. So what I learned from him, so his transformation, so like this, what you're seeing here, it's probably still not the complete package here. He looks pretty young, but to see how he looked like and how he played when he freshly arrived to the NBA, and then what he turned into, I mean, that is just really inspirational. That is truly like a hero's journey. So on the other hand, you can see though how confident he already was as a kid. So there's an interview with him when he was like 13 years old, and like that is a kid who knows exactly where he's going and what potential he has. So just working hard and believing in your ability, I think, is very valuable. And that's sort of something that I see with other people too, that if you have the mindset that you have the potential to do crazy things, and you're gifted, and you're sort of the cream of the crop in terms of quality and the potential for even higher quality, then that sort of pays off. Like, I don't know if you know people like that, but I definitely do. Like, some people are actually quite delusional. They're really not that good, but they sort of seem to believe that they're amazing, and then they just consistently act like it, and it sort of tends to pay off for them in the long term. So I think he's not a good example of that, because I mean, he had an immense potential, that's clear, but still that self-belief that is always there, and it's very apparent with him, and I mean, it's clear that it paid off.
And what would you train with Giannis?
So I would actually like to just do a whole body workout with him and try out some of my favorite lifts. So I would chin-ups, definitely. We would do, I would make him use some of my favorite, like chest press, plate-loaded chest press machines, chest-supported row machines, and just see how strong he is. Because he's a gigantic person, and he is very muscular. But it just would be interested that, okay, like a basketball player who is also clearly working out a lot, how does he measure up against someone like me, who, like, all I do is work out and I don't do basketball, for example? So it would be interesting.
All right, next one here.
Menno. So with Menno, I would say that the biggest sort of value that I took from him is just seeing how much it can pay off if you keep looking into things that other people stopped looking into. So some of his most successful articles and takes that he had in the industry were moments where he could shock people, because some principles were just so widely accepted and sort of just no longer looked into, that just the fact that he researched it a bit more and just kept looking for evidence, that was enough basically to create like mini revolutions almost. So like nobody really was looking into, what the optimal protein intake is anymore, or like, do you really need more protein when you're dieting, or like the 3 mechanisms of muscle hypertrophy: muscle damage, metabolic stress, mechanical tension. Like, it was just repeated so commonly and as just the truth that, okay, this is how it is. Those are the 3 mechanisms of muscle growth. He looked into it once more and he started challenging it, that, well, I would actually contest whether metabolic stress and muscle damage are really contributors to muscle hypertrophy. He popularized higher frequency training, which beforehand it was already sort of accepted. Okay, 2-3 times could be better than training it just one time, like a given muscle group. But because of him, people even tried training 4, 5, 7 days a week per muscle group. And that was definitely something new. And like, none of those things would have come around if he was not one of those people who just never stopped being skeptical, even when nobody else around them seemed to be. So that would be the biggest thing. And as far as what I would train with him, if I met him, so I guess I would just love to go through some of his own workouts with him, like just see what he does for himself and just complete, like, let's say a week's worth of training with him, just to see what sort of, like, maybe he has some rituals around training, which would be unusual for me, but maybe for him it's very helpful, and I could like take some of those and apply it for myself later, or see maybe he has some unique exercise combos, or the way he puts together a workout for himself, like this one really helps him to make the workout more manageable in terms of fatigue, but still get out the stimulus that he wants. Like, people sort of have their own little things that they do for themselves, but maybe they don't even really think much of it. Like, it's not something that could help everybody out there, but for me, it seems to work. I definitely have those things, and I'm curious what it would be for him. So I guess that's what I would do.
Yeah, that's great. Sounds like his superpower is to not buy into tribalism and group thought, which is
Yeah.
prevalent in all aspects of life. So I'm going to jump
Yes.
into the last one here.
Yep. Steve Hall. Who? Okay. So first of all, I would say, like Yanis, he's a good inspiration in terms of the transformation that he went through. So I actually, like, it's kind of mind blowing. Like, I've seen some videos on Instagram of him training, and wow, like how jacked he is. And I mean, a couple of years ago, he was already pretty jacked, and it was like, okay, Steve, it's very impressive, but what you managed to accomplish there. But I mean, he just tacked on a whole new layer on top of that. Um, some of the other things that I learned from him, I guess, is also just doing the simple things that you already know works in your life, and how that can just bring you more success. So he hasn't done anything like crazy, specially unique. Like, he didn't really have like a revolutionary idea in terms of his business, for example. But they just kept putting out podcast episodes. He kept being consistent on Instagram. And I mean, the company very nicely grows, and they are very successful at this point. So I think that is just a useful thing to remember always in any area. That, yeah, like, you can always think about optimality and always think about little hacks or things that you could implement and could change the game for you. But while that's happening, just think about the things that you already know are working, and just keep applying those, and something good will most probably come out. So maybe that would be the main thing. And what I would train with him. So I would, with him, I would actually like to just go through like a whole, I don't know, like 3-month long block, and
Wow.
so I would even consider him like getting coached by him,
Okay.
because he trains quite differently compared to how I like to train. So he has a way of sort of periodizing his mesocycles and macro cycles. So he will start with lower volumes, escalate to higher volumes, trains further away from failure in the beginning, trains closer to failure in the later stages of a mesocycle. So I would try that out. That's not how I do things, but it's good to experiment with different things, especially now that I'm more advanced. So
Cool.
I'm really not sacrificing that much by doing something else for a couple of months. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for doing that. So I'm going to jump into a different area. I saw a video where you said you've pretty much used every workout app, and it's
Yes.
not personal enough to you. It's like doing a colonoscopy. So it's hard to work for a beginner and an advanced trainee. So I'm curious, imagine it's the year 2030 and AI has allowed a co-pilot that can do pretty much anything for fitness. What would your ideal AI co-pilot do for you?
Okay, so basically, what would be the perfect workout app?
What would be
Is it
the
not?
perfect workout app, assuming
Yeah.
that AI gets better over time?
Yes. So FitNotes, the only two things that it doesn't know how to do is having one exercise like the bench press, let's say, and counting the training volume from that bench press towards multiple muscle groups. So, and by the way, I've heard of one other app which can do that, but that is only available to iOS at this point. That's Gravitas. So what that does, for example, is taking the bench press, and it counts one set of bench presses as 100% stimulus for the chest, and then say 0.5% or 50% stimulus for the triceps, and I don't know, maybe also 100% stimulus for the front delts. If I could do that in FitNotes, that would be wonderful, because the thing is that to say that the bench press is both triceps and chest is a little bit misleading, because it's a better chest exercise than it is a tricep exercise. But to not count the triceps at all, that's also not genuine. So that would be good. And then if, let's say, I could create a workout in FitNotes, and I could just share that workout with a client of mine, and then I could like see what he or she is doing there, and I could just jump in and make notes and comments and whatever. That would be really good, because I mean, you can see trends if you're looking at your training history, that can be very informative, and they can definitely help you make decisions like programming changes, exercise swaps, whatever. Sometimes you just need to change things in your workouts. So that would be maybe the other thing.
Cool. Yeah,
And
I
I
feel
would
like
say it
your
would be 95%.
expectation here is actually pretty low. I could imagine a world where an app and hardware device could not just figure out what muscles are being used, but what that correct proportion is based on your lifts. So I think we can get really personalized over time in the next 5+ years.
Yeah. I mean, if we're truly talking about like a co-pilot, which is gonna be like your personal training assistant, I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
then it could do it all by itself. So it
That's what I'm
sees
suggesting.
the trends in your lifts. So okay, you've been doing this many sets, and your reps went like this, and the weights went like this. Okay, at this point, you should probably do a plateau breaker, and you should increase the weight anyway, and just try to hit an MRAP. Or it seems like this volume is a bit too much. You seem to not recover, so maybe reduce it a little bit. Like, it could give you its own tips, and I mean, that could be greatly valuable.
Awesome. So one thing I love about your channel is the mindset stuff that you discuss. It's very relatable to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw up some pieces of content that I think you've consumed, and maybe you can tell me about when it came across you and how it either impacted you personally or fitness wise, and it can be negative or positive. Just give me one thing about it. Is that cool?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, this one, I would say this might just be the best sort of personal development book that I have read. I could put in some other ones, but those are more so like, I don't know if it's a productivity book or business book or something. I'm not sure that qualifies as personal development, but this one definitely does. And I mean, what I loved about it is that while it was about something so general and so kind of vague, like habits, like have better habits. I mean, can you pick something more generic and unexciting as a personal development concept, right? Yet it was incredibly practical, and you could see how doing certain things could actually improve things. So in a lot of cases, you get a lot of motivation, inspiration from these books, but not a lot of sort of practical insight or practical guidance. In this case, you did get that. So
How have
it
you
was
applied it? Have you applied it at all? Like, is there an atomic habit that you've used in the past? You know, he says something like, "Get your shoes out, have it ready." Like, just that first piece. I'm curious if there's something that sticks out for you.
so I cannot think of anything like really concrete like that I started doing, and it's like, oh, like beforehand I always had an issue with,
Mhm.
I don't know, brushing my teeth, and now I do brush my teeth, for the record. But so it wasn't like that, but but it sort of comes up in a lot of kind of everyday situations where I want to make sure that I get something done or that I don't forget something, and then I do something to make the implementation easier or more convenient. And it can even be something like very obvious that people have been doing, like always, ideally long before the birth of atomic habits, like even just putting something in your calendar so that you don't forget it, or you setting a reminder. That's not like some atomic habit super tip, but while I'm doing it, that is the book that sort of pops into my head, and the
Okay.
principles in it, that like the reason I'm doing it is so that I reduce the friction between planning it and implementing it. So so I come back to this book sort of in my head in a lot of seemingly insignificant situations. So I think that the residual impact is there to this day. And I read this book like 5 years ago at this point or something.
And you even got to interview James.
Oh yes, that was that was the result of at least like a, I don't know, 3 or 4 year harassment process. So
Awesome,
I started harassing him before he started writing Atomic Habits.
Wow.
So
All right. All right, I'll move on here.
Oh my God, I love that movie. It's so like on the one hand, the humor in it seems not super sophisticated.
All right, let me move on here.
Yeah. So this one was so this is something that I sort of have this perpetual on and off with in my life, implementing this better and then not so good at other times. But in every moment, I definitely keep going back to that quote from the book where he says that it is becoming a lot more valuable in today's world at exactly the time when it's becoming a lot more rare. So it creates this mismatch, which also creates this huge opportunity for anybody who is able to implement this. And now I think I have a very different relationship with procrastination and a different relationship with the guilt that I feel when I'm procrastinating, because now I don't just think to myself that I'm just a lazy someone, but I'm sort of realizing what's happening, and that is that basically I stopped practicing a skill, which is a skill that you can focus on something for long stretches of time, and you fight off the urges to get distracted and to do other things. Like, this is really something that you need to practice. And okay, so you didn't practice this for long enough recently, so the skill just sort of like weakened.
Yep.
So yeah, it's I think it's a useful realization for anyone.
It's useful, but it's very hard to be perfect with deep work and having deep work sessions and not being distracted, right? But I agree, it is harder and harder in this day and age. So if you can do it, it's pretty powerful. All right, last one here.
Oh yeah, this was so it's funny that you're showing this, because I just thought about this like today, like in a random moment. That's really odd. Yeah. So I think that this one was almost like this fantasy that I needed to let go of, that such a hack would exist, because the thing is that it really just doesn't. So the thing is that you can work on yourself, and you can develop your skills and your relationships, and then you will get to a point where good things will come to you, and you will progress faster in your career, and better opportunities will be given, and all of that. But there is no magic diet or supplement or drug or nothing like that which would just change your world like that. And I remember being so elated, like sort of in this elevated mood after the movie, because like, wow, like surely I can sort of hack myself somehow to have this, and I had to realize that it's just not possible. Yeah. So yeah.
Cool. All right. So I want to kind of change directions here. So I saw a video, and a few years ago you mentioned the switch from calorie counting to auto-regulating. It's something that I've personally had challenges with. So I'm curious, what were your expectations when you made that switch? And now, what's gone better than expected and what's gone worse than expected?
So what was the first part of the question? Like,
it was just regarding not counting calories and switching to auto-regulating.
No, it's just, so what went better and what went worse. But before that, you also said something that like,
I was just saying I've had challenges with it. I've been more successful when I count calories, and when I haven't, I've gotten off track before.
Yeah. So I think that if someone is not having success already with not counting calories, because that's how everybody starts, right? Like there's a default state for any human, basically. If you're not successful already and you would like to be more successful, then I would definitely recommend counting calories, because having some calorie awareness and just having a general idea of what types of foods contain what and how much, that is definitely invaluable. And then I would say that the switch to not tracking is something that you definitely don't need to do on a permanent basis. So some people just enjoy the process of tracking. It gives them a nice sense of security and they don't really experience any downsides. But if you feel like you're limited in certain aspects of your life, like social meals, social events, you're more likely to skip on these. And that is partly because of your fears of overstepping your calorie limits or something like that, then consider giving it a try to not track, because it's kind of a unique mindset that tracking puts you into or forces you into, for a lot of people, not for everybody. But just the knowledge of, okay, knowing that I have this sort of cap that I cannot exceed today, and then every bite of food is bringing me a little bit closer to that cap. Then implementing something which brings more uncertainty, because it's obviously harder to track calories when it's not you who prepare the food and the macros are not listed. And just being surrounded with a lot more energy dense foods, where even if you do know the numbers, it's a lot harder to stay within your limits. That can make it a lot more likely that you will just try to avoid these uncertain situations as much as you can, which to an extent will be a positive thing, of course, because ideally you would not be out in like fast food restaurants all the time eating super high calorie foods. But eventually it sort of can backfire, because social gatherings will usually involve some food or drinks or something. And to an extent, you need to attend these every once in a while if you still want a social life for yourself. It's really hard to avoid it completely. So if you feel like your social life is suffering because of this, for example, that would be a good time to give it a go. And just in general, I think just like almost everybody should go through a stretch of time where they do track calories to develop that calorie awareness. I also think that every good calorie tracker person should have the ability, at least, to still be on track towards their fitness goals without tracking. So if I ask you, what do you think would happen if you abandoned calorie tracking now? And your answer is that, well, I would blow up like 50 pounds right away, then that's an issue, because that sort of suggests that you have no actual relationship with your own body in terms of listening to your hunger and satiety signals, which is important to be able to just eat normally as well, not just according to a tracking app or something. So these would be some sort of indicators why it would be a good idea to abandon calorie tracking. But like I said, there are definitely people who have excellent social lives. They can eat out and it doesn't stress them out. It also doesn't stress them out if, okay, I know that I was over my macros today, I will just go a little bit lower tomorrow, make up for it a little bit, no issue. And they can also auto-regulate all of this based on hunger. So, okay, my goal is to eat, or my target according to the app is 3,000 calories. But if I feel full after 2,500, it's no issue to leave the rest behind. So if you can do all of that, then, I mean, by all means, keep tracking. And I don't really see that there's any real downside there.
Okay.
For me, there definitely was.
I've been doing it for 8 years, using
Right.
an app and counting calories, and I've gotten really good at just treating every day as an individual day. So if one day wasn't good, I just start the next day fresh. But I would like to do it as an experiment, and I'm curious, would you suggest trying it in a bulking phase, a maintenance phase, or a cutting phase?
So oddly enough, I think actually you would I think the highest likelihood of success would be on a cutting phase, which is sort of against what maybe you would think intuitively, but it's very easy to put yourself into a deficit if you eat low energy density foods. You put the distractions away, like you don't eat in front of your television or in front of your laptop or watch YouTube videos on your phone, and you just kind of focus on your food and say like, okay, I'm going to eat until I feel like nicely comfortably full, and I'm going to eat like pretty low energy density foods, like lots of veggies, some fruits, like especially like the lower sugar ones, and leaner protein sources. Most people's issue is actually that they just intuitively put themselves into a huge energy deficit, whereas they would actually do better with some more moderate paced cutting. So I think that's the easiest start, and you would be probably surprised by how much easier it seems than with tracking calories, because in reality you will be probably eating calorie amounts that you would never prescribe for yourself. So I don't know what calories you're normally cutting on, but let's say it's 2,000 calories. Well, it would not be exceptional at all to have multiple days at like 1,500 without tracking, which if you then track back and see what you actually did, you would be like, whoa, like eating that low of calories. So I would say that's the easiest start. Maintaining is just a little bit more difficult, but once you realize that, okay, like it doesn't mean that I need to be at my estimated maintenance calories at every single day, but kind of just hovering around this sort of range, and then over time I'm probably going to maintain, then you realize that it's also very easy. Gaining is definitely the hardest, because ideally you're going for a rather slow rate of weight gain, and you just kind of keep that up for a long time. And doing that without tracking is definitely the trickiest. But if you can get into sort of a food routine, not that you need to have like a precise meal plan, but you're sort of eating similar things day in, day out, which is kind of how people over time naturally tend to do things anyway. Then you can land on a setup where you reach that slow rate of weight gain over time. So also not rocket science, but a little bit more complicated, I would say.
Cool.
Yeah.
So still touching on the kind of the diet side of things, I know you've talked about trigger foods. So I'm curious, what's your Mount Rushmore, your top 4 trigger foods, and how have you managed to either incorporate or avoid them over the years?
Ooh, that's a good question. So number one trigger food would be probably nut butters. Like they're very energy dense, and you can really only have a little bit of them before you start creating some issues, because the calories just add up so quickly. On the other hand, like it's very tempting to just have another spoonful just here and there. So probably that would be the number one. Number two would be probably nuts, like things like salted peanuts, almonds, or again, just it's so easy. Like if you just have another couple of kernels, you're already up non-insignificant number of calories. So that would be number two. And then let's see, number three would be probably, I mean, to be honest, they are so far ahead. They're probably like actually it used to be oatmeal. Probably not.
Interesting.
Yeah. I would say at this point oatmeal is only if I'm very lean, because then my carb sources really just come from veggies and fruits. And even from oatmeal, I can have enough, at least, so that it would lead me to overeat by enough to where I notice it. Because
if you told the average person that oatmeal is your trigger food, their minds would be blown.
So yeah, like that requires a rather low standard for the complexity of the taste profile of the foods that you're eating. So if you really only eat like veggies and fruits as your carb sources, like they have a very specific kind of like rougher texture. And compared to that, like anything that is like grain like, and it has that kind of softer texture to it, is already like, whoa, like this is this is crazy palatable. So so yeah, it's like oatmeal would definitely be one of those. And I guess if I ate bread regularly, like, then that would be another one. But yeah, like I would say it's more so oatmeal is only if I'm very lean. And then I would actually also put rice here, cheeses certainly. So I actually always ran into trouble with foods that were sort of not like obvious junk foods. So I never had issues with like chips or like Snickers bars or something, because like, yeah, like it wouldn't even really occur to me to keep a bunch of Snickers bars in the house, because like obviously that can run me into problems. But not like peanut butter and rice cakes, whatever, like these are some things that people eat on contest preps. So yeah, I mean, of course I can keep it in the house, and then I would, and then inevitably I would run into those problems.
I get it.
So,
Right. Rice and sushi for me. I can eat unlimited rice if you give me the option on rice. I have a big appetite and I can eat a lot of rice. So I have to be very careful with
yeah,
my rice intake, as crazy as that sounds.
yeah, and like just even plain rice with some salt is actually, like, I don't know,
With
very
soya
nice to
sauce,
eat.
yeah, it's money.
Yeah. Okay, so that I'm not completely alone.
All right. So I think one thing that's really important is around talking about the ideal body fat percentage for the average person. I know initially a lot of your content and other YouTubers' content talked about getting to 10%. And at some point you change your stance to getting to 15%. I'm curious what the main reason for that is, based on, I guess, reflecting on your end.
Yeah, it was mainly the experience that I had as a coach, and just seeing people chasing this goal and sort of reaching a certain point within their journey where things just get really difficult, and um and they were kind of amazed why this is so difficult, um which was sort of just a reality check that I had to give to them at that point. That was sort of just something that prompted me um, to talk more people out of setting those goals for the long term, because it's one thing for me to give them that reality check, but for them, giving up on their diets at that point seemed like failure.
Mm.
Like, I set this goal for myself, I gave up on it. Like this is such a anticlimactic finish to a long diet, where you sort of feel like your willpower is giving out. And the reality is, like, no, like 10%, you have to be aware of it, that is actually very lean. People just talk about it as if it's something that you should go to regularly, because you need to start your bulking phases from such a low body fat percentage. But no, like, being at 15%, you already look lean. You are lean compared to 99% of the population around you, and is already a very good place to start a gaining phase. So I think, just from a clarity for the people perspective, I think it's important to just put that out there. As far as shooting for something as an ideal body fat percentage to maintain for the long term, it's too common now for lifters to not even spend any significant amount of time just eating normally, at least at like a maintenance sort of intake, but especially at the surplus, and actually focus on muscle building, because they spend like 3/4 of their years cutting, because they just got into these cycles where, okay, I try to reach this low body fat, either I give up midway through, then eat myself back up to a higher body fat and then try it again, or maybe I even reach my goal, then I break down, then I overeat, then I need to undo the damage that I did with the overeating, then I'm dieting again. Like, it's so common to see these destructive cycles that people get stuck in, that it's not only counterproductive for their fitness goals, but it's also just really terrible from a psychological health standpoint. And I've seen so much of this, especially like in the applications that I see, for coaching or for consultations where people come and just briefly write down their histories, and like that's how they spend their last couple of years. And these are young guys. Like it's
Sucks.
pretty heartbreaking to see a 20-year-old guy. Like this should be like a really fun time of your life. Like and that's how you're spending your time.
Yeah.
So at least I waited until like 25 or something when I did that. So so yeah.
What's funny is if I'm at the gym and I'm like 14 or 15%, I'm one of the leaner people at the gym. And a lot of the guys will say, like, I can't imagine if you lost any more weight. And
Yeah.
it's funny, just that's kind of the normal perspective is like at 15%, if you have even okay muscle development, you look pretty good and you look better than the majority of the people in the gym.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and again, like you can go to a beach, just look around, and like how many people do you see that are that lean? Especially like if you're working out, then 15% looks really good because you even have some muscle to like give some extra contour to everything. So yeah, like it's now people have a better ability to estimate body fat percentages, but like a lot of the 10% body fat guys that people at least used to refer to were actually closer to 15%.
For sure.
And it's just, it was repeated so many times that like stop your bulk or gaining phase at 15%, start at 10%, that like I guess people just intuitively started thinking of 15% as if that's a high body fat percentage, but it's very far from the truth.
Awesome. So I'm going to finish today off with a kind of fun question. So I want to know, what are your 3 favorite jerseys that you own, and what's the one jersey you'd like to have that you don't?
Oh, nice. So 3 favorites. So, number 1 favorite one would be one of my Giannis jerseys.
Okay.
And actually there I have a hard time picking between 2. So I have 4 jerseys from Giannis. And I have like this darker, like blackish color, and one the green one, which is their main, like standard, like home jersey color. And in one of them, I look somehow a lot more jacked than in any of my other jerseys. So I like that one for that. On the other hand, I really like the color of that green one. So I have a hard time picking between those 2. But that would be one. And then I have a yellow Steph Curry one. I like that one a lot as well. And then the classic red Jordan one. I think.
Wrong.
Sorry.
Can't go wrong with the classic Jordan.
Can't go wrong. And I just love the color of the jersey in general. Like I think it's a shame that the Bulls are not good in the NBA these days, because I think that's the best jersey in the whole league.
You can't see it here, but I have a Michael Jordan rookie card back there, just hiding in there. And it's in the red jersey, the retro red, like the 80s one. So what's the one jersey you wish you had that you didn't?
Oh yes. That would be, that's an X. Oh yeah. So I think it would be So it's a tie between either a Charles Barkley Phoenix Suns. So I love their jersey as well. I think it looks really cool. I would love to have a Barkley jersey. Or the other one would be a 91 jersey number Dennis Rodman, Chicago Bulls jersey.
91, yeah.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, thanks for your time today. Can you tell anyone who's listening where they can find you?
Yeah, so thank you for having me on. It was fun, first of all. And so on YouTube, if you search for SSD Abel, so letter S, letter D, Abel. And like there you can find, I don't know, like 500 videos thus far or something like that. So been on YouTube for a long while. And then that's the main place. On Instagram, actually, where I plan to be a bit more active, it's Abel Fit Stuff. I used to be also SSD Abel there, but Instagram decided to block that account. And otherwise, I have a website called ssdable.com. So I guess you can also find me there. So awesome. Those will be the places.